welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today during your lunch break, I'm sure. This is the second installment of the YIPs and Advisor Masterclass series. You may remember Andy if you had attended our earlier class on personal brand building, and he's come back graciously today to help us understand content creation, how to get our brand out there with the best kinds of content. Um, just a little bit about Andy before we get started. He's the founder and CEO of Advisr. He built Advisr to help SMEs find and connect with insurance brokers they can trust. But he started his career at eBay and then Fairfax. Whilst at eBay, Andy actually established the first advertising deal between Google and eBay Australia. So very cool. In 2007, he then founded a leading digital marketing agency, Switched On, and 5 years later, it was acquired by a global advertising leader, WPP. Some clients have switched on included CBA, Amex, Flexi Group, Westpac, Spotify, Vodafone, all these big brands. So, and then after all that, Andy has acquired 20 years of digital marketing experience, especially focused on B2B and B2C customer acquisition. So he's the perfect expert to take us through content like this. And I really hope you enjoy this session. Please ask us questions in the chat. If Andy misses any, I'll make sure I pick them up and ask him as he goes through his slide. So thank you, Andy.
Thanks so much. Great to be with everyone today. Thanks, particularly on a Friday heading into the weekend. It'd be nice to have the weekend, hopefully some good weather. We've got loads to cover today, so I'm going to jump right in and just bring up some slides that we'll be talking through as well. So here we go. Okay, so it's great that we're able to be here today running through this. Here we go. We're going to spend most of our time talking about content and creating and sharing content because that's really important, right? Content's amazing. Sometimes it can feel, though, when you think about content, it can feel really tricky and it can feel like there's a load of it out there that can be a bit overwhelming for you. It can feel, sometimes people say it's like putting your face into a fire hydrant, and you think about the amount of content that's being produced by all sorts of brands all over the place. And so how do you do it? How do you do stuff that is really great? How do you do it in ways that are consistent? And how do you do it in ways that are definitely not boring? Today, we're going to talk through two sort of key things. Firstly, sharing, like where to share and how to share and what to do. And secondly, how to create. What kind of things could we create? How could we start thinking about planning that? What are some of the tools that we use here internally and some of the tools that we've used that I've used in agencies over the last 20 years? Acknowledging on the webinar today, there's loads of people that we have with lots of levels of experience. So it'd be great if you get a chance to see the poll, just have a look at that down the bottom and be able to just share with us your sort of level of expertise. This might be in your role, so it might be in your work context, you're producing this amount of content or you're responsible for that, or it might even be that you're just prolific on social or prolific at sharing content and sort of building that profile around things that you're passionate about. Either way is fine because the skills, they translate, don't they? So let's get stuck in. So sharing content and where to do it. A couple of key things to think through here really is, who is your audience? You've got to know who your audience is. And by that, it's really helpful just to actually sit there, grab a pen and paper and write it down and go, this sort of is my audience, this person, this type of business in this area who looks like this. Because if you know who your audience is, then that helps you to work out where your audience might be, what channels they're on, what things they're talking about, what things interest them, and how they communicate. Once you know a little bit about your audience and about where they are, then you can do some research, and we'll talk through some tools to do that later on. In addition to that, you want to think through your content and how you approach it, how fun it can be and how serious. There's a spectrum there, isn't there? Sometimes you've got to be all the way at the serious end. Sometimes you can have a bit more fun. Both can be on brand, actually. And so you want to think about how you can have that interplay working well. And then finally, you want to think about that personal versus corporate. And if you start to think through some of these areas, it helps that whole how do you produce content and where do you share it to become a little bit easier, a little bit more digestible. We were talking to one insurance brokerage underwriter, and they were saying they focus on business owners. They have a minimum of 3 premises. They need a turnover about 3 million plus. Their types of businesses they look for are this, this, and this, and they exclude this, this, and this. And they need, and so that kind of ability for them to do that helped them to really nail in on what they should then talk about and how they should do it. And so very simply, you can see there an example of what that could look like. But where to share? Let's think about LinkedIn. LinkedIn, I think, is going off at the moment. It's really been really popular over the last 12 to 18 months and really changed. It's been around for a while, but it's really starting to grow in a good way. It's very professional in nature. So your messaging and connections are really powerful. People seem to respond to messaging and connections via LinkedIn, maybe more so than email. So it can be a great way to connect with people. One tip on that, don't try and sell straight away. Try and add value straight away. Add value, add value, add value, and eventually people trust and believe you and want to connect. There are also lots of groups on LinkedIn. They historically haven't been very active. That's slowly shifting, I think, and if you can find some good ones there, that can help. It's more serious. It can be about career building and positioning, so think about that as well, and more serious in nature, although that's sort of changing too.
I had a quick question about LinkedIn for you.
Yeah.
We're using it just as an everyday person. I work in underwriting. I have connected with some people where I can see there's just an overload of content, and I actually just can't keep up with all of their posts. And I wonder, for the everyday person, and I'm sure you've got lots of underwriters and brokers on this call.
Yeah.
What's a reasonable amount of posts that you should be aiming for, not to overload people in your network?
Yeah, it's a great question. We're going to talk about that. I don't think anyone's getting overloaded. I think it's probably the other way. It's about value, right? If it's really good content, then it's never overloading. It's about creating good value.
Right.
We'll talk through that later, actually, because there's a few people that
Perfect.
say produce heaps and let the algorithm sort it out.
Excellent.
So I hear what you're saying, and you feel that as well, but I don't think that's necessarily our problem all the time.
Perfect.
That's okay. Facebook, a lot more personal. It's a lot more about local connections. It's changed a lot in the last couple of years, right? Demographics older of people that are on it. Everyone's parents are on there and that kind of stuff, and businesses are on there, and it's different. It's changed. You can have a bit more fun, a bit more personal, a bit older, the audience. You can see here as well, I'm giving you some image sizes that are on the right-hand side. All this is available from a tool called Canva. We'll talk about that later on. Really easy way to create graphics. We use it all the time. It takes me, a pretty average graphic designer, and we can do some stuff that looks, okay. So it's good. Very simple thing, very cheap to use as well, and great Australian business, which you've all probably heard of. Your website. What content should you be posting on your website? I think the question there is, what do people actually want to do when they get to your website? Are they really going to go to your website to find the latest information on something very specific? Maybe, maybe not. I reckon most people go there for a few functional reasons. Really, it's about your phone number. How can they connect with you? Can they, if they're a client, so someone that already knows you, how do they pay an invoice? How do they retrieve some information? For a prospective client, though, it's a little bit about that final tipping point. They've probably done a fair bit of research by the time they come to your website. So it's what's that bit that is consistent in that message and gets them across the line. So question to ask, does your design enable this? Here you can see from BJS, they've got it called out on their homepage, top right, very easy for a prospective customer to do any of those things. It's very transactional in nature. When we look at Advisr, that's our platform. Advisr gets a pretty big audience. We had about 65,000 people last year. We generated about sort of 10,500 lead events into brokerages. That's phone calls and email inquiries and clicks and traffic and lots of things. We think it's all about educational posts, building credibility. We think it's about customer reviews, building trust. We think it's about connections, giving people the ability to connect in whatever way that they want. And that's why people come to Advisr, to find that broker. When you think about these things that we've talked about so far, there's a few tools you could use, and they fall into roughly three sort of buckets. One is scheduling tools. So this is how do you create content and sort of stack it up in advance. You don't necessarily have to be doing this real time. You can stack it up in advance. And that's helpful because we know things are going to happen in the future. The weekend always happens at the end of the week. Christmas always happens at the end of the year. Melbourne Cup always happens in November. There's lots of things we know, so we can schedule things in advance. Some of these tools do some of it for social, some do more across sort of the CRM or email marketing things, depending what your businesses use. Again, This could be in your role professionally, or you could even think about it personally and go, I'm going to invest in that tool. It might cost you $20 a month, $30 a month, $50 a month, but it might help you to be more consistent at this personally and build your career. So yes, it's corporate and apply it to your job, but also think about it personally as well. Imagery and design. So we'll talk through some of those. Canva, the standout. It's just super easy, cloud-based. I'll show you some of that later. Maybe put in the chat if you're using some of these tools. That'd be really helpful to know too. If you're using Canva and those things, let me know. Giphy, it's really interesting. You wouldn't think about insurance brands and insurance brokerages being on Giphy, right? Producing GIFs. This business was bought for about $500 million by Facebook recently. It's a directory of GIFs, but I'll show you some cool stuff there. And finally, for me, it's all about the measurement and performance. So there's some Google tools out there you can use. These help you to understand really what do customers look for, how do they search for things, what keywords do they use, and what language. So again, if you go right back to knowing who your customer is and you've been tight on identifying them, you can really nail in on that and create the content that connects with them. You can do that across Google Ads, which is their paid platform. Google want you to know what people search for, so you can advertise against it. And there's some other tools out there as well, like SEMrush and Moz, which has been around for a while. That's getting quite nerdy and technical. If you want to talk to me about that, you can, but we'll keep moving because it's a bit technical. So a recap on like content, or where do we place content? Think about your audience. It's always about your audience. Knowing who they are really clearly and identifying them, knowing where they play, and then doing that research. And you can do that personally too, to see what works and to see what's connecting as well. Then you want to measure some of that as well. Measure performance, see what's working, see what isn't. And don't worry if things don't work, because in a week or two, no one remembers, right? So don't worry about it. You're better off just trialing lots of things and seeing what works. And you'll work it out over time. You'll navigate that terrain. Think about that dynamic between the fun and serious. Some brands are very strict on being serious. We're always got to be serious. Some go way too far on the fun side and probably need a bit more serious. But really, they're doing that with a strategic approach, I believe. So you just want to think through that and think through what are your brand requirements. Again, you might think about that personally. How much fun stuff do you want to post versus how much serious stuff? If it's all serious, that can be a bit dry, and you actually need a bit of personality, I think, for particularly for careers, right? Like people like hiring people they like and that are fun and exciting. So think about that too, and that personal versus corporate. All of that might be fairly obvious for you guys on this call, and that's okay, because it's about doing the simple things right that really help in this and doing it consistently. So that's covers off sort of our first bit, really around placement, or where we'll do that. We'll move on now to talk about how we actually create great content. So what to focus on. Again, you'll hear me say this a lot, understand your audience. It's all about your audience, right? Not necessarily about the messages you want to push out. It's about what they want to hear. So try and understand that. Where are they at and what influences them? There's loads of things you could do, and there's always some low-hanging fruit. So you need to think really critically, what is that low-hanging fruit? And it might be one or two things that you go, we could just do something around that. And it might be relatively easy to do and can get you some good sort of action. So think about trying to find that. Don't try and do everything. Even big brands, big companies with big budgets are always trying to simplify. So if you think about how you can simplify, that's a good strategy. How much content to produce? So this was your question from before, how much to produce? There's a spectrum here around effectiveness and time. If you're producing multiple pieces a day, they've got to be good and they've got to be interesting or insightful. Or you can produce not very much and produce one piece a quarter or a year. That's probably not enough to engage people. It's somewhere, you need to find the sweet spot that works for you. There's an online marketing guy, or a guy named Gary V. If you've heard of Gary V, let me know in the chat. But he says, so he runs a media agency now. He started it, and it's about the same size as Ogilvy, so a pretty big global agency. He reckons you should be putting out 15 pieces a day. 15 pieces of content a day. That's a lot, right? So he is great, and his content's amazing, and he's always like, stop listening to me and just go and do it. And so we probably need to do that too. So that's where I'd push back again on that. Are we producing too much content? Or if they might just not be producing good content. That might be the problem. If it's interesting, you love it, right? The reason we love Gary V's 15 pieces a day, because it's good. He's at a different level, though. He's got a film crew that follow him around now. And what he's really smart at is anytime, so I heard him on a thing the other day talking to a bunch of entrepreneurs. He actually said he looks at whenever he does a talk, he'll break that talk down into hundreds of pieces of content. So it's about reusing, recycling, and being consistent. That enables you to do things at scale rather than starting fresh every time. What type of content to develop? So again, the longer form styles and then breaking that down. What is that bite-sized bit that could be consistent? And we'll talk through again some of these and I'll show you some examples of different ones. Longer form ones, they take time. They take a lot of time. That report or that lecture style, down to how to I's, down to the other end of, you can actually just grab other people's videos and share them. You can be a curator and that could be your strategy. I just want to curate. I'm going to find 3 videos on this every week or whatever it might be. And that could be your position. Does that all make sense so far? That makes sense. We can see we've got some Gary V fans in the chat. That's good. It's not surprising that you're all here thinking about content. If you're Gary V fans, if you haven't heard of him, give him a listen. It's a bit crazy, but he's good. As I was looking and preparing this, I actually was searching for free video software because video is massive now and starting to take off. And so what are the tools you can use? Interestingly, this is an article. It's a piece of content produced by a company called Buffer. You might have seen earlier on one of the tools I referenced was Buffer. It's a social media scheduling tool that enables you to schedule posts and content that you want to share across all channels. Here you can see they've actually got this piece of content is very good for SEO, so ranks in Google for free video software for marketers, very targeted on who their audience is. What they've done is just curate. They've gone out and found all the 18 pieces of software, and they've got literally a little bit of commentary, no more than 3 or 4 sentences on it with a nice image there. Pretty easy content to produce, but pretty effective and gets them a lot of traffic. And businesses that are able to understand their client, solve their client's problem with content, and the client ends up buying the product. That's sort of the loop that they go through. So you can see it here. It's very tight sort of title and page title on this, which helps it to rank in SEO. It's not broad or vague. The person that finds this knows exactly what they're getting, is exactly what they're looking for. We did some of this through Advisr actually earlier this year. So I want to break this down and we'll go through this in a little bit of detail and then we can talk through it and ask any questions. What we actually produced is we looked at a report. So we put together a report, longer form bit of content. We looked at 12 months worth of data. 12 months worth of data to see how brokerages perform in regards to digital marketing. So let's stop and think. Who's our audience for Advisr? Well, it's insurance brokers. And more specifically, it's the marketing people or the person that's responsible for their digital or exposure or reaching customers. What does that person in that marketing role, in that brokerage, want to do? Well, they want to do a great job of digital. They want to reach people and they want to know how they're comparing to others. So this report we looked at, we actually pulled together 24, and I'll step you through. There's a few slides here that outline the report. We actually stepped through looking at 24 of the major brokerages who we think are doing a really good job. All the networks, all the associations, and some of the smaller brokerages who are very targeted at digital and have done a good job over the last numerous years. So we'll step through that. You can see straight away we pull out some insights. Again, we're just using data to tell a story here, and we've got some charts that come up. We're talking about the people we want to read the report, the people at Steadfast, the people at Fundex, the people at McLeod McShane, at CBN, at Adroit, all these places. And what we actually did after we produced this report, I actually pulled out specific information for each of those people, each of those businesses, because we have contacts there, and emailed them a summary of their sort of performance, only 2 or 3 points. Again, it's all data driven. And once you have the data, it happens pretty easy to tell a story out of that. And then showed them how they compared against others. Because one thing we all know is people love to know how they compare to others. Everyone loves to know whether they're above, whether they're below, whether they're growing faster or going sideways. And so this report was a very effective tool. For those who performance wasn't as strong, the way we framed that is it's all upside. It's all an opportunity. Here's what you could do. So it's positive. For the ones that are doing a really great job, we framed that as look at the amazing job you're doing. Don't stop now, keep going, because the market's going to catch up. So this report, as we scroll down, we had that summary at the top. We actually produced an interactive chart here, and this was all built using Google Data Studio, free tools. I love a good free tool. So we grabbed some data that we used from Neil Patel, again, a tool, doesn't cost a lot of money, and we put that together into a Google Sheet. We then put Google Data Studio over the top. So this was an interactive report. It's just an image here, so I can't show you exactly, but literally the companies could choose and select who they wanted to compare themselves against. And so they love seeing that, and they could see their performance versus others. You can see from a marketing perspective for Advisr, our kind of message here is we're big and we're growing quickly. When you look at the darker blue line right in the middle of the graph, that's us. We're big and we're growing quickly. Great news is Q3, just since this report is finished, we've continued to grow. We're up about another 20% on this. So we're continuing to accelerate. Again, that's sort of our message we want to get out there. We're here to partner. We're big, growing quickly, and we want to work together. Not everyone likes a chart like that. So here's a bubble chart. Again, same data, just presented differently. And here you can see what this looks like. So again, the brands could jump in and they could have a look at them and they could see how they compare to their key competitors or whoever they want to look at. Here we're looking at growth on the vertical axis and volume of audience along the bottom axis. So as with all charts, you want to be in the top right or as close to that. And that big blue circle right in the middle there, that's Advisr. So we're growing quickly, we've got a good growth rate, and we've got decent audience size as well. So it's a good message for people to see. But that's content, right? This whole report becomes content. And when we put it out there, it's our marketing content that's telling our story, but our story in the context of the market and our customers or the people we're keen to engage with. Here you can see we are able to educate as well. So at the bottom of the report, we talk about where the data comes from. We talk about what is SEO. So again, giving value, helping people to understand. And then we give people the option to have their data included in the report. So some people have reached out saying, wow, we'd love to be included in the next edition of that because they want to know how they compare. So again, it's a piece that led to engagement here. But longer form, not easy to produce and not something you can produce sort of every day, because it's just not relevant every day. But once a year at a key point in time, it'll be a good report that we'll produce. And we can update it quarterly and we can do some insights. Does that all make sense so far? Any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. We've got Anna-Marie helping as well in the chat so she can answer any questions you might have. Moving on, here's something we've done in the last probably month or 6 weeks actually. We do something that's called Feedback Friday. Not a new idea, not an idea we came up with, but one we borrowed. So on Advisr, brokers can have feedback left by customers. What do brokers love to see? They love to see customer feedback. And we know that customers love it because brokers on Advisr with customer feedback get seen a lot more than brokers without. Just makes sense. It's how we do things these days, right? So here's what we did. And we produced this image in Canva, and I'll show you how we do all of that. It sounds like some people are across that, which is great. Very simply, we use the hashtag Feedback Friday. We highlight these great brokers, and we'll highlight half a dozen of these every Friday, and we'll do it consistently. We always make sure we tag the broker on LinkedIn, and that's great because brokers love seeing that too, right? Often a broker or an AR can be out there potentially working hard on their own. You don't always get a lot of love, right? It's nice to get some love, so we try and share that around. And here you can see, so this one works really well. What do we see happen here? We actually see, and we see this nearly all the time, is the brokers love it. They come in and respond, and they often go, this is great. This is Gail. We do a lot of work with Gail. It's based out of WA. She loves what we're doing, so she gives that sort of positive feedback to us. In addition, we see brokers will often then share that with their own networks. So we step back to what content are they producing or sharing. They're taking the content that we've produced for them and taking that message out to their market, which is great for them and great for us. We've got someone else telling our story. So that all makes sense. Pretty obvious, some of this stuff, right? But it works. And so the trick is being consistent. One thing that we've learnt is that not everyone knows that you can tag people in LinkedIn. Now, I know a lot of people here will, but not everyone knows that. So if you don't know how to do that, or that sounds tricky, send us an email or get in touch. We'll help you do that because it's great. It's a great way of engaging people. And when you give value, then people engage with that as well. Okay, key thing. It's not all about us. This whole thing, it is about us, but it's not about us. Our whole message is not about us. We say, here's someone who's doing a great job. Here's what customers think. We're building that message. We're telling our story, but we're telling it through the context and lens of other people. So creating content. There's 3 excuses, I reckon, that I hear from people when it comes to content, and 3 things that I think about from time to time. It's 1, how do you stay not boring? Because there's nothing worse than boring content, right? It's just dull. So you've got to keep changing it up, mixing it, keep it fresh. Not everything will work forever. You can't just keep producing the same thing. Spice it up from time to time. How do you produce it consistently? How do you do this with new ideas, or how do you get in that headspace and be able to produce consistently? I actually think that means it needs to become a rhythm in your work, or you need to create time for it. Half an hour a day, or whatever that time is where you think we're going to produce this content, we're going to focus on this, and we're going to do it. If you do a rhythm or a cycle of that, then that can be really helpful, because it can enable you to, when you get to that moment, not to have to think of everything afresh, but you know where you're up to, because you've done it before, and you know it's Wednesday. On Wednesday we do this. On Thursday I do this. So think about that. And if anyone's tempted with the excuse that they're too busy already, I just reckon that's boring, and everyone says that about everything. So it's either not important enough for you, would be my pushback on that. And if it's not important enough for you or your boss, then make it important for them by showing them some ways to make it great. We've shared this slide before, but starting is easy and hard. Jot down ideas, come up with some snappy titles, write some key messages. Just test and trial and see what works. And trial it for a little while. Not just once and think, did it work? But, maybe 10 times. Commit to 10 times of producing something. Okay, let's jump into some tools. This is one called Answer the Public. Has anyone heard of Answer the Public? Okay, literally the website, answerthepublic.com. You type in any keyword at that website and it will produce a whole heap of information around that keyword, all the phrases. So if you can see the slide here, I've got a screen here where it's a bit bigger, so I'm just reading over there. You can see we've looked for cyber insurance. That's our keyword. It's got all those variables around it: who, what, when, which, where, why, and it turns them into questions. These are questions that people ask that you can create content about. Question could be, why do I need cyber insurance? Or what does cyber insurance really cover? Or what does cyber insurance not cover? Or things like that, or whatever it could be. There's a whole heap of them here. So there can be no excuses for not having enough ideas. That's what I'm trying to say. And there's loads of stuff here. The other thing, this is Google's predictive search. So if you just start typing any keyword into Google, and we all see this, lots of options come up. Have a look at those. Use those as thought starters for content. Here you can see for insurance, we could write around lots of things. You could write about insurance comparison, the Contracts Act, whatever it is. If you're a lawyer, have an opinion on that. Create something about that. How do you decipher it for people, or highlight the 2 or 3 key things? This is about, Google is the greatest place for understanding what customers are thinking, because they tell it every day in what they ask and what they search for. Here's a tool called the Google Keyword Planner. This might be a bit complex, or you might have seen it. If you've seen it, or you know what I'm talking about here, then drop it in the chat, because I reckon that's pretty sophisticated. This is for Google Ads. So when you're running an ad campaign on Google, they want to make it easy for you to know what keywords to search on, or what keywords to advertise against. And so they tell you, which is great. But you can use that tool not just for creating your ads on Google, but for thinking about how you create content. So again, you can type in a keyword here and it tells you all the variants around it and how popular they are. So you want to think, do I want to write content for something that only one person searches for a month, or something that's a bit more popular? Now, one of the challenges here is you won't be the first person to do this. It's been around for a little while. There's lots of businesses thinking about it. And so you want to think, how do you find that sweet spot between popular, enough volume, and you'll actually be able to get some traction and have some input, something that's valuable or new. But the Google Keyword Tool, a great way to do it. Again, this can help you if you need to convince your boss that you need to spend time on it. because you could say to them, for us to advertise against this is going to cost $10, $20, $30, $40 a click. That's a lot of money, isn't it, boss? Maybe we should dedicate some time to building some organic traffic in here, and I'll take the lead on that. I reckon bosses, they might be interested in that. So let's jump into some planning tips and tricks. There's lots of ways to think about how you plan your content. And again, I think if you can plan well, then the execution becomes a little bit easier. You're not coming to it thinking afresh every time, oh, what am I going to do this week, or how do I do it? The way we used to break it down in agency land and how we break it down now in Advisr is we think about themes and trends. These are beyond the business or the ecosystem that we work in, but are ones that are happening within society or at large. And you can read them here across the top, the themes and trends. Monday, for example, meat-free Monday, clean start, motivation, all those things. You can tap into that. Tuesday, Taco Tuesday, or something else. I was probably hungry when I was putting this together because lots of it seems to be food related. But you can see all these things, right? Thursday, Throwback Thursday. What was your company doing 20 years ago? Is there an old photo of the boss? Where did you start? What's something historic you talk about? What was on the playlist 5 years? There's a whole heap of ways you can tap into these. Wisdom Wednesday, lots of this stuff. And these hashtags are popular. So you can tap into them. They can be a little bit tricky for brands to do well, but I think you can navigate those waters. Taking those industry or those sort of societal themes or events that are happening, you can then bring it down to what's specific to our industry. Now, all this week, the NEBA convention's been on. So you want to know what to talk about? Talk about the NEBA convention. You could do a summary of the day. You could do a recap. You could do, this is the talk. This is the one speaker I liked, and this is the one I didn't, or this is one thing I learnt and one thing I was hoping for. And today, we've got our YIPs webinar happening and loads of people here, which is great. So we've been talking about that content in the lead up to it, like why should people come? What will they learn? And positioning it that way and doing that in Consult. Bring that down another level, you can actually jump into the About Us. So you can actually tell a little bit about what's going on for you and your business. Maybe you've got a new office and you want to show people the new kitchen or the new tap that works. It can sound mundane, but it might be interesting enough for your audience, right? Like, come and join us for a coffee. Check out our cool new coffee machine. You can do those kind of things. Not all the time because it gets a little bit boring, but you want to think about that. Or a new partner or a new product. There's been some new insurance products lately, in particular around personal cyber that have launched. Have an opinion on that. Share why people should think about it. Share how it can protect their kids. That's interesting to people, right? The other thing, you can talk about milestones. Is there some milestone that's happened or someone's achieved that? Again, putting some context, not all about you, but about the customer. Our staff stay around forever. That means you're not always dealing with the new person. Things like that could be ways you could say that. And then think about things that are happening this month or also this year. So you can jump into that as well. We know Christmas always happens at the end of the year. Melbourne Cup's always the first Tuesday in November, things like that. Content, we've talked about this before, so I'll keep moving here, but here's just some tips and we'll share all these slides afterwards so you can do that. These are things that you could think about, areas. Again, there's lots of blank space. I want people to write things down and try something. Come up with something. What's the local event they want to talk about? So let's develop some content. Bear with me a second. I'm just going to jump into Canva. I want to show you some stuff. Okay, so we can see Canva here. How many people have we got using Canva? If you're using it, just dump that in the chat. A few people there. We've got a few people just on our polls who are producing one piece a day. We've got a couple of those. Hardly any. Most people seem to be producing hardly any. Our aim is to move that hardly any just up to a little bit north of that. That'd be good. Biggest barriers seem to be time and good ideas. Well, hopefully we're creating some time here, and if we can create some rhythm, then we might hopefully we've got some good ideas, and hopefully we'll create some time through those rhythms. Okay, used once. Tamara, I love it that you use Canva. It's the best, isn't it? It's great. Well done. Preeti, you got to try it again. Come on, Laura, you got to try it again too. You guys have got to get back in there. This is the greatest product ever. It's like $20 a month, change your life. Makes you look like a superstar, and they just make it easier and easier and easier. So we use it all the time. You can see here there's loads of moving little parts here. You can create lots of social media stuff. You can even do your presentations. It's sort of replacing PowerPoint. You can do graphs, you can do data, you can do lots of stuff in here. And you can use all of these as templates. So I'll give you an example. We were thinking about cyber insurance. That was what we were going to create some content on. Let's create some content on cyber insurance. So here we've created our size. We've got the size. It's a LinkedIn size. That makes sense because let's talk about cyber on LinkedIn because it's very professional and we can talk to SMEs about how they need to protect their businesses, particularly with people working from home on their own devices. And cyber insurance needs to be looked at. That's a good topic, right? It's probably interesting things there. So literally all we've done is we've searched over here for some photos of cyber. You can see them all down the side. And you can see we've just created a few graphics. I did these in advance just so we could see them, but they didn't take very long at all. And they're not the best ones, but they're okay, right? And they're a starting point. We can build from them. You can see here we could have a cyber one that looks with some lines, a nice lock on there to represent cyber. You notice as well with these, the first one we had some text on there to add that in. Ask a question. People like answering questions. It's an engaging thing. Put your logo on it. Very easy to do as well. Make sure you have your logo on there or a brand. Moving through cyber as well. Or we could come all the way down and look at one that's a bit more like from the Matrix. Again, using a GIF to do that. Creates attention. Whenever something's moving, it creates attention and attracts people in. All of this you can use. All of this pretty easy to do. Or we go down to one that's a bit more personal, right? A bit fun, a bit quirky. Might work for you. You might try it. Your boss might think, what have you done? You might have to explain that, but that's okay. You can just say we're trying something. We're encouraged to try something. So that's Canva. Jump on board with Canva. It's great. So let me just jump back over here. And actually, I'm going to go straight to Giphy. Who's heard of Giphy? Or who's used a GIF? Who's shared a GIF? Someone in our chat. Let's go. Who's shared a GIF? Hopefully lots of people. Yeah. Well, that doesn't surprise me. It's great, right? Like it's cool. It's a fun, easy way to do it. But why on earth would that work for insurance? Surely no one in insurance is doing this. But I'll tell you they are. So from going to Giphy and having a look, you can see across the top here, we've got a bunch of insurers that are doing it, that are actually actively creating their own GIFs and sharing them so that other people can use them. That's a pretty amazing thing for what's a fairly conservative industry to be operating in this space. So let's have a look at it. Some of this was happening 2 years ago. This is Generali, based out of Germany, right? What's amazing here, we've got stacks of these GIFs of their lion that anyone can use. Now, that's on brand, yes, because it's red. It's their lion, yes. And they're having a bit of fun. And it's pretty playful, and they want people to use it. I don't know if you saw it. I'll scroll back to the top. But let's have a look and see how many people have viewed this or how many times these GIFs have been viewed. Can anyone take a guess? Anyone want to have a guess in our chat window? So how many times they think it's been viewed? 3. Josh, that's a good guess. I'll tell you, 3 million. Okay, yeah, now we're getting closer. 157 million times. That's massive. That's a lot of times, right? You think about how much your media and marketing teams are paying to get exposure. That's pretty crazy. So these guys are on there. And this is from a couple of years ago. This is from 2018 and 2019. Root, the insurance company, the telematics one out of North America. You look at what they're doing. Some pretty cool stuff as well. This one came up just new, actually, then Root TV. But again, just producing fun stuff on brand in Giphy. That's pretty out there. Now, if you don't want to create your own ones, you can just borrow the ones that are there. You can search whatever you want. Everyone knows how to do that personally. Think about how you could do that sort of in your job or for your career. You could be the person that creates great things. You drop it into Canva, you add some text over the top and add some opinion. You've got some great content that's moving pretty quickly, pretty easily. The one next thing I want to talk about is just how do we track all of this? Most people will want to know how things perform. You can look at the number of likes, you can look at the number of clicks or impressions or things like that you're generating. But if you're operating in a marketing role, you want to tie that in potentially with your Google Analytics. And so you can do that very easily. Or if you want to do this for your company, ask them how you can do it. But very simply, there's a tool called the Campaign Builder, Campaign URL Builder. Here, you can just put in literally the URL you want people to go to. So you can see it's on Advisr, the cyber insurance one. We're on social media. It's a banner. And our campaign name is Cyber Insurance Check. generates a URL for us to put behind there. When someone clicks on it, automatically feeds that data straight through into Google Analytics. Then when we run a report in Google Analytics to say how did things perform, we can see exactly how they performed. People that clicked on that, how long they spent on the site, what they did. Very easy to use. Again, all free, easy to use. Let's jump back into this presentation. So Canva, if you're not on Canva, go do that this afternoon. Tell your boss you've got an important meeting and you're out for a couple of hours and you'll love it. Again, you're back on Giphy. There's actually an insurance brokerage or agency in North America doing it. Very small one, but they're doing some stuff. I was pretty surprised to see that, but it's pretty cool to think someone's there. And here you can see some Geico stuff. Very much on brand, very much timely, Halloween-based, and ready right now for them to do. So that's pretty interesting. They want people to share that, to tell that story for them. So they're creating the elements that their customers or people that are fans can take into market. And there's a campaign URL builder that we talked about. So who can create content? Well, you've got content marketers, there's agencies, there's a bunch of people that do that. You can get journalists, industry experts, or the advisor content team. But I actually think everyone can create content to some degree. Everyone can have a crack at it and design some stuff, do some things, try some things that work. And so let me encourage you to do that and to think through that. Again, who's the customer? What's your audience? Where are they? And what kind of things do they want to engage with? We'll have a bit of time for Q&A coming up soon, but a little bit about Advisr. So again, we had 65,000 people came there last year, and we're growing quickly again this year. We have generated about 25,000 impressions each month. We're big and we're growing quickly, which is great. So if you're a broker on here and we haven't done enough together just yet, then please reach out and we'd love to do some more together to help you reach more customers using some of these techniques, but also using the Advisr platform to do that. 3 things that Advisr can help you with. 1, we have a content marketing service. We do this. We help people write content. Brokers say to us, that's great because it gets straight to the top of Google because of how our site's built and structured. They get imagery, they get things they can share, and it looks professional. So we take some of that hard work away for you. Secondly, you can add your team to Advisr. So if you're a broker and you're not on Advisr, add yourself. It's free. It's easy to do. It'll get you straight to the top of Google as well. When someone Googles your name, they'll find that profile. So if there's anything you want to sort of push down in Google, this can help to do that as well. And the third one, we've just actually announced this is the second time we've run these, but the Insurance Broker Awards for 2020. They were a big hit last year, and we had lots of brokers asking us about this year. So we've got the Advisr Insurance Awards powered by Agile Underwriting, which will be great. And so there's lots of different categories where you can nominate, either self-nominate or nominate someone that's a great broker in your brokerage. And that'll have to be running for the next 6 or so weeks. There's a link. We'll put a link in the chat window for that. Okay, let's keep moving down. So that sort of draws us to the end of our time together. Jack, I can see your question there about some audio visual. You can only see the chat. I'm not sure what's happening there. I hope everyone else is able to do it. I think we're good. But now we'll just open it for questions. So if there's any questions that anyone has or anything they'd like to share, feel free to drop that in the chat and we can work through that or ask a question. We've got some questions. I'll just go to those 2 open questions. Oops, let me just change the layout. There we go. We'll go back to that. So we've got 2 open questions here. One from Simon about LinkedIn. Have you got guidance on confidential information? As an expert witness sharing photos that are not relatable to specific matters. Is this reasonable? Yeah, you've got to be careful. You will understand your legal requirements and you've got to fall in line with that. You always want to put a disclosure where you can or reference what you need to make sure that you're covered for that. But make sure that you can add what you can. If it's confidential, then you probably know whether you can share that or not, I'd imagine. Okay, Danny, we've got a question from Danny. How do you use a separate app or platform to gain and track analytics? I'm currently obtaining the info off the actual social network. Yeah, really good question, Danny. I'd encourage you to use Google Analytics. It depends Depends what you're wanting people to do. If you're wanting people to go from the social network onto your website, then you want to track that URL that they're clicking through on. So again, you go to that campaign builder to build that URL to add in the specific terms. That can be an easy way to do it. And if you've got a website, then you want to set up Google Analytics. Again, very free and easy to use. And you can do it through another tool called Google Tag Manager. Can be an easy way to do it. If that's getting too technical, feel free to ask me later and I can sort of step you through that as needed. But again, that's a great thing to do. You want to track that so you can see that. Ideally, you want to track the where people have come from and when they've landed on your site, what they actually do. So then you can start to see which content or channels or audience deliver what you want them to. Be that time on site, or signing up to something, or buying something, or engaging or becoming a client. But all of that's pretty trackable and should be looked at, and you can set up some dashboards that enable you to see really quickly what's working. But great that you're tracking some of those. So great question, Danny.
Andy, I had a question for you as well. You mentioned earlier about a software program Buffer to help allocate some time in advance for when posts will be distributed on social media.
Yep.
So that would obviously take some time. You have to allocate some time through the week to set that up, even though it helps you automate part of it. What do you think is a reasonable amount of time to dedicate to something like that, to get it out of the way for the week or the month? What's the best way to go forward on something like that?
Yeah. It's a good question. I think it comes down to that planning stage. So work out how much you want to produce and what that looks like. And if it's images or if it's a post, then you've got to do that work of producing the content, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that takes time, and you can do that in advance. Once you've got your content, then scheduling it becomes relatively easy, really. That's probably the easier part. Once you've got the content, getting it there is easy because you just sort of say, we want this one to go live at Tuesday. One tip would be when you think about the time that you set things live, you don't always want to do things on the hour because on the hour can be a changeover time for people, right? When do meetings start and finish? It's always on the hour.
Right.
And the other thing to think about is when do people jump onto some of these channels? So sometimes that's in the commute time in the morning, or could be early afternoon when people are having lunch, or late in the day, and even late at night sometimes. And you might want to match your content to be tied to that. Do you want to produce a really heavy report and send it out at like 11 p.m.?
Mm-hmm.
That just sort of doesn't work, right? But if you had some really cool GIFs that you could use that were on brand, that were sort of something people could snack on for content, then you could do that. But setting it up doesn't take very long. Buffer, pretty easy, or Hootsuite, or most CRMs you can do it through as well. HubSpot you can do it through, and a few others. But it does take a little bit of time because you want to track the URL, get your content, get it right, write it well, create it, share it. Yeah, it's not the smallest job, but it's again part of the rhythm. If you're doing it personally, probably 20 minutes a day, you'd get a long way if you spent 20 minutes a day. And if you want to spend maybe an hour or 2 hours a week, you could get it done.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Laura's asked a question, so we'll just jump onto that. A lot of people in the webinar, it's a good one. What sort of content have you seen or shared that has gained a good audience? And what sort of posts and content are you drawn to? That's a good question. To Advisr, what are your thoughts on asking for feedback on sites like LinkedIn? If you're meaning asking for reviews or people to leave you feedback, I think LinkedIn's an interesting one. I don't necessarily know if their individual feedback on people works just yet. I don't think it's as valued as it could be. I don't think it's as effective. What we see is we see in other channels and other ways it works pretty well. So you want to be thinking about at a company level or a brokerage level, building Google reviews and building reviews on Advisr. And we've actually got a great integration that can enable that to happen. So both of those can come across. Your Google reviews can be on Advisr, which is awesome. But as an individual, it's really hard to get individual customer reviews and feedback. LinkedIn is more sort of about your career or what it's like to work with you in that colleague sense or a boss sense, potentially more than in a customer sense. So on Advisr, we're more about the customers leaving feedback about what it's like to work with an individual. And again, we see that being really popular, actually. Brokers love it. and the customer loves it ultimately. And so if the customer loves it, gives them that insight. They've heard about someone, they come through, they find it, they see 3 or 4 good experiences, they go, oh, that's great. They pick up the phone. They do that confidently. But good question, Laura, about content. And it's a good thing to share. There's lots of things to share about content and things to work through. Hopefully today we've touched on some of those for you. If anyone has any questions though, or has any comments on that or things they want to add, feel free to add those into the chat. Let's see, we had a few. Yeah, anytime, Laura, on that. Anytime, that's fine. So we've got some open questions. One more open question. Michael's question on the chat. On LinkedIn, it's common to share articles, but pre-populated default images are sometimes quite bad. Is there a way to share articles and use custom graphics? Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, you can do that. So in the scheduling software, you can actually replace or change the image. In LinkedIn natively, I'm sure you can do that as well. You can upload that image and change that. And then you want to make sure that it's clicking through to the right spot as well. Yeah, I agree. The default one that they often pull through doesn't always work. They're trying to make it easy, but doesn't always work. The other thing, the default one might not include your brand, and you might be able to put your brand on an image that links through to something, even if it's not linking through to your website. So you can link through to third-party sites potentially and do that, just to get a bit of brand exposure. Yeah, good question. Okay, we've got a few more minutes if anyone has any other questions they want to ask. It's been great to spend time together today. Change the layout back to that, okay. It's been great to spend time together. There's lots to do here. We've really skated over the top, but hopefully we've gone into a few areas thinking about that short form content. How do you create that? Some sort of longer form pieces, and where do you get ideas from, and how can you create that? And all the way into those longer sort of report pieces that you might want to build in, a monthly report or an annual report. And then thinking about the channels, understanding where your customers are, and understanding how you can add value to them. Not making it about yourself, make it about others. That's often way more interesting for the other person than hearing, about you. It's been great to spend time together today. This will all be recorded. We'll share all the slides afterwards. Great to reach out. I'll reach out and connect in with people on LinkedIn so we can, keep connecting.
Just on behalf of YIPs, Andy, thank you so much. All of your advice and your content and your input into these discussions is always valued by all of our members and non-members. It's open to them too. I'm sure we'll continue having sessions like this going forward. I know a lot of us enjoy it, so thanks again.
Great. Okay, thanks so much, everyone. Have a great Friday and a great weekend.
Thanks, everyone.
Cheers.